Hello and thanks for joining us. We're starting with an exhibition made up of X-rays of women attacked by men to highlight what one doctor calls the daily horror of violence against women. The San Carlo Hospital in Milan thought it was a powerful way to observe the International Day for the Elimination of Violence Against Women. Monty Francis reports.
They are images that tell a story: a fractured hand, a broken leg, a cracked rib.
What's interesting about X-rays is that we are all equal. Our bones are equal to those of others, and therefore it can be any woman.
The display was the idea of surgeon Maria Vantadori, a trauma surgeon at San Carlo Hospital in Milan. The X-rays reflect the scores of women she's treated in her 26 years of practice.
There were 142 women murdered in Italy last year, so on average, one woman every 3 days. This figure is always tragic. The number 3 often appears in the figures on violence. 1 in 3 women suffers violence. 1 woman dies from beatings every 3 days.
Italy's National Statistics Agency reports that 538,000 women were victims of physical or sexual abuse in the last 5 years.
We realize that what is happening in Italy may be even more serious than what is happening in less industrialized countries. Because in, say, Afghanistan, one can perhaps find cultural or territorial reasons, for example, related to the war, while in Italy, France, or other European countries, no.
But for Dr. Vantadori, the numbers don't really tell the story. She's found that an image is worth 1,000 words.
Now, in 2017, British artist Lubaina Himid became the first black woman to win the Turner Prize, as well as its oldest recipient. Her 2004 installation, Naming the Money, is on display in Bordeaux's Contemporary Art Museum. The work attempts to restore identity to the black men and women seen in 17th and 18th century paintings, who at the time were treated as mere symbols of their master's wealth. Alison Sargent tells us more.
My name is Anan. They call me John. My name is Kenkebe. My name is Wachera.
Giving back the names and identities of these men and women, some of the only black faces Lubaina Himid remembers seeing at the museum as a child, in paintings from the 17th and 18th centuries.
Those people had families, they fell in love, they had ambitions to be better at what they do. I'm trying to make the history of an enslaved person into the history of a human being.
Dog trainers, servants, musicians. In the original paintings, they are symbols of their master's wealth. Freed from their context, the painted wooden figures become people.
During that time, the only representations of black people were as slaves, as servants alongside their masters. It's as if she's extracted them from the paintings and given them back individuality, a body, a voice, and a collective strength.
Bringing them to life in Bordeaux's Contemporary Art Museum is a form of historic justice. The space was originally a warehouse built in 1824 to store colonial goods.
This installation has never been in such a beautiful location. It's beautiful, it's strong though, and that history, I think, is all around.
The installation is meant to speak to the experiences of all migrants, whose personal identities are broken down and remade by political and economic forces.
Next, they're arguably one of the world's most famous bands. The Beatles are celebrating the 50th anniversary of the release of their iconic album, Abbey Road. The photo on the cover of the Fab Four crossing the road in London has become an all-time classic. Valerie de Kimp takes a look at the story behind the album and how the Beatles made a pedestrian crossing famous.
Some say it's an age-old tradition, a ritual to imitate the Beatles, who walked on this pedestrian crossing 50 years ago, and And today, the scene repeats itself. Every day, fans gather on Abbey Road in London to recreate the iconic image on the cover of the album, the last one they recorded as a band. In the summer of 1969, tensions have died down after months of internal bickering, and the band is back in the studio. The four musicians work together and individually, which is what saved the band, according to their producer.
It was obvious that they didn't work as a team anymore, and that was probably the necessary condition that allowed them to coexist in the same studio.
17 songs in total, 3 hits, including Come Together. The lyrics were originally written for the campaign of a California governor, and it's because of this song that John Lennon was sued for borrowing the phrase flat top from Chuck Berry. But this time, it was George Harrison's turn to shine, composing one of the band's flagship songs, Something, which was made for Joe Cocker before the Beatles made it their own.
It's one of the album's major songs. It's an absolute gem. And for the first time in the Beatles' history, Something, one of his compositions, was picked as a single.
And there's another story within the story. For the album cover, 6 photos were taken on a pedestrian crossing outside the studio. An instant classic, it has inspired countless parodies and fueled the imagination of conspiracy theorists who claim Paul McCartney was dead. Why, they asked, is he barefoot and holding his cigarette with his right hand if he's left-handed, while Ringo is dressed for a funeral? Paul McCartney himself would reenact the photo for his solo album 25 years later. The shot would also symbolize how the Beatles took separate paths.
The album ends with a song called The End. Then there's the pedestrian crossing outside the studio, as if they were leaving. None of this was premeditated, but that's how a legend begins.
The band would eventually break up on the heels of their second biggest success. The EMI studio was then renamed after the iconic album, and the Abbey Road crossing became the most famous crosswalk in the world.
As Tokyo looks ahead to the Olympics, it remains a city steeped in the past and tradition. Ancient art forms dating back hundreds of years still hold a big place in cultural life. And it's not always easy to get access to these artists, but France 24's culture team managed to arrange an interview with a Kabuki actor in Tokyo. Here's a look at how the 400-year-old performing arts is keeping up with the times.
It's a story about love, death, and revenge. Based on Japanese folklore about a medieval prince, Oguri has been a popular kabuki play for centuries. But the performance here at the Shimbashi Embujo Theatre is very different from classic kabuki works. It's called Super Kabuki. Using projection mapping, LED lighting, and electronic music, it's designed to appeal to modern audiences.
I've been told that in Super Kabuki there are 3 S's that are very important: story, speed, and spectacle. The original creator wanted to make something new that would be more widely accepted by today's theatergoers.
In Oguri, Bando plays the hero's long-lost wife, Princess Terete. He's a so-called onnagata, a male actor playing female roles. Only men are allowed to perform on stage, a rule that dates back to the 17th century. Most performers are born into a family of kabuki actors, and like Bando, have been trained since they were toddlers. Outsiders are rare and are mostly limited to playing background roles. While maintaining the tradition, Super Kabuki has brought some radical changes since it was introduced in the 1990s. It has even added an adaptation of a popular manga series to its repertoire.
Kabuki has more than 400 years of history. During all this time, it has continually evolved by maintaining its original form and adding new twists to it to make it relevant and entertaining to today's audience. Thus, it managed to remain popular all this time.
The new stage direction for Augury seems to have worked, attracting both long-time Kabuki fans and first-timers.
From classics to modern stories, I like the variety Kabuki offers.
It's very elaborate and spectacular, but at the same time, traditional.
They've passed on the traditional stage art through generations, but have always added twists that reflect modern society. That's the great thing about Kabuki.
After the performance in Tokyo, the troupe will travel to Kyoto next March for their next representation of Augury.
And you can watch out for our Japan special show, which is coming soon in the new year. Now we'll leave you with the American director James Gray's first foray into opera. He's directed Mozart's Les Noces de Figaro. It's showing at the Théâtre des Champs-Élysées until the 8th of December. Remember our website. We're also on Twitter, Facebook and Instagram. There's more news coming up on France 24 after this.